Thanks, everybody. Looks like we've got folks joining the conversation. We want to get started as close to 12:30 as possible. And so as we continue to bring folks in, I wanted to welcome everybody to our Employer Advisory Committee meeting. Kim, good to have you as a co-moderator this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Good to see everybody.
Absolutely. So just some housekeeping items before we get started with the agenda. This is a Zoom webinar, so cameras will not be coming on, and we've disconnected the chat feature. However, we do have a really robust Q&A, so folks can type in questions as they come up, and we will have subject matter experts that are tracking and monitoring the Q&A. We may answer those questions live. We may answer them in writing only. And then in addition, if we need to take it back and do additional research, we will keep track of that and we will get back to you with answers, if not during the EAC, immediately following EAC in the next couple of days, as we, again, need to find more information or do a little bit more digging to get accurate information shared and conveyed. I think that is about it for housekeeping. Kim, am I missing anything?
The one thing I would like to add is that this is an employer staff focused meeting. So if you are a member that happened to make your way to the call, I'm going to ask that you reach out to our Retirement Readiness division if you need assistance regarding your benefit or a family member's benefit or something along those lines. Or our customer service division, the 800 number that is on our website. This meeting is specifically for employers and staff of employers and updates geared towards their running of their business. So again, if you are a member, this is not the call for you. If you have questions, our customer service representatives are available right now if you have questions, and you can always reach out to Retirement Readiness on our website and schedule a visit with them as well.
Great. Thanks, Kim. That also reminds me, I wanted to let everybody know that the materials are also posted at CalSTRS.com, and those can be found. Again, we've got a couple of hyperlinks to help folks access the materials. That's been a challenge and questions we've received at prior EACs. So again, CalSTRS.com/employer-advisory-committee. And you can find the materials that are being shown on the screen as we go. And so with that, let's get started with the agenda. And I'm going to turn over to Jeff Zimmer.
Thank you, Diane. I am Jeff. I am the director of the business area at CalSTRS, formerly known as Member Account Services. So I just wanted to talk to you about what we're doing a little bit different in terms of how we're branding each other. So we're branding ourselves. About a few months ago, we had this opportunity with our staff to ask a few questions about what our mission is, who do we serve, who are our customers, and why we do what we do. And this is a little bit of a word cloud that we gathered from all of those responses. And you can see employers are at the literal heart of it, right in the middle there. That you are who we serve. Those are our customers. And we thought to better align what we do and who we serve with our name, we changed it. And you may have seen some previous publications. My name on the Zoom webinar might spoil it a little bit, but we wanted to focus more on how we work with you to build the information that becomes our members' benefit. That is still our ultimate goal at CalSTRS, but I really wanted to focus on the brand of how we work with you. So to that end, we are now Employer Services, and that's our mission statement there. I included that as well, and really focused on the relationships and some of our internal business partners, of course, they're important to us as well, but employers are really our core customer, and we want to work with you to provide service and education, again, for the information that becomes our members' benefits. So from now on, you'll know our division as Employer Services. You can always call us CalSTRS. We'll come running if you say CalSTRS. We'll absolutely answer your questions. and we won't wait to be specifically called employer services. But I just wanted to share that with everybody to let you know that some of our old documents will still say member account services. We can't go back and change them all because there's a lot out there. But from here on out, we'll be known as employer services. Our board has been advised that they're aware of it. We've done it internally, and I just wanted to formally announce it to this group. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. But that was what I wanted to share with everyone today before I kicked it back to Diane and Kim.
I don't see any hands or anything in the Q&A for you, Jeff.
Thank you, Kim. Any questions that come up, reach out, please. Again, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today. Kim and Diane.
Thanks, Jeff. And with that, we are going to turn it over to Joycelyn Martinez-Wade for a legislative and regulatory update. Joycelyn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joycelyn Martinez-Wade, Director of Governmental Relations. And if we could move to the next slide, I'm going to provide you an update on some of the bills we're tracking. And as you can see on this page, our sponsored legislation. Our legislative matrix is one of the materials that's posted on the website that Diane spelled out for you. And so you can follow along there as well. Although some of these bills are moving fairly quickly, so the locations are updated. And I've gone through most of these with you before in an in-depth fashion, so I'll kind of use the shorthand to refer to them. But we have 3 sponsored bills this year. AB 539 regarding our investment procurement process and giving the board authority over it has already made it to the Senate. So it's in the second house waiting to be assigned to policy committee. That should happen it should be heard sometime in mid to late June. After the budget happens and after we move through all of the bills getting to the second house. AB 551 regarding providing a traditional IRA as part of our Pension 2 offerings is currently on the assembly floor and awaiting hearing there. And SB 634, our housekeeping bill, has also moved to the Senate and is waiting assignment in the policy committee on that side. So those are our sponsored bills. Any questions on those? I saw a hand or Q&A, but I think it might have been answered. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are bills that we have positions on. And again, I'm not sure how many affect you too much directly, but I want to make sure you had the information. AB 1019, it was more of a traditional divestment bill and having us divest from investment vehicles issued or owned by the government of Turkey. We had an opposed position on that bill. That bill actually remains in its first policy committee. It did not move forward. So it's still in the Assembly Public Employment and Retirement Committee. SB 294, we have a neutral position on. This removes the 12-year limit on service credit that a member can earn as an elected officer of an employee organization. So that's moved to the Assembly. It made it through its first house and it's waiting to get assigned to the Assembly Policy Committee. And I want to spend a little bit more time on this next one, SB 457. And you can see Turkish divestment again, kind of in the shorthand title there. So you might think it's the same thing, but this is actually a really different approach. And I want to bring it to your attention because it really does affect employers. As you can see, it's an option for employers. And what the bill does is it allows individual districts to choose a portfolio that excludes Turkish investment vehicles or those that are issued or owned by the government of Turkey. Now, this is a wholesale change in how our investment portfolio would work, because as you know, we're a multi-employer risk-sharing plan where all of the contributions that you provide, as well as member and state contributions, are pooled together and then invested across several different asset classes to get the assumed rate of return, at least, of course, is our goal. And that way we can pay benefits with that. This would allow an individual district to choose a portfolio without Turkish investments in it and pull that aside. We have no way right now of separating that out. And so that would have huge implications for our portfolio, for our benefits administration, because of the members that are specifically in that district. We're not quite sure how we would separate that out, because the most important thing is that it goes apart from how our funding plan operates. And so how contributions are paid from employers and the state specifically, because the members are tied to a couple of different things, either set in the law for 2 at 60, of course, or based on normal costs for 2 at 62. What happens with this separate portfolio is that these districts would also lose access to some of the higher performing asset classes like real estate and private equity, because those we need that risk sharing pool to be able to invest in those asset classes. And if those are removed, then we might have a lower rate of return. And that in turn would require higher contributions from employers' estate, maybe from those 2% at 62 members. So it's something we're really concerned with. You can see we have an opposed position. This is one issue out of many that people look at for divestment. If you pay attention to our board hearings, we have people on particular issues come to us. I think that may be an occurrence for district meetings or school board meetings if this is happening. I don't know how many districts are equipped to make these investment decisions. The bill is actually 2 lines long, 1 line for CalSTRS, 1 line for CalPERS. It's not clear how a district would make decisions about what actually is a Turkish investment vehicle. And so I just want to bring that to your attention. We've spoken to a group of superintendents, so CSESA, the California County Superintendents Educational Services Association. They are taking an opposed position on it as well. I just wanted you to be aware from your perspective that this was out there and could be a huge change in how we operate on this retirement front. So thank you for letting me indulge on that one. And HR 82 at the federal level, you're familiar with the windfall elimination provision of government pension offset and how they affect our members' benefits. They do not affect our members' benefits. Let me restate that. How they affect any Social Security benefits our members might anticipate receiving. And so we're supporting the repeal of those 2 offsets. Next slide, please. And actually, I'll pause for questions in case there's any questions on those. Those are, again, bills that the board is actually taking positions on. And as we move to the current slide we're looking at, these are additional bills that have a direct and specific impact to CalSTRS that I anticipate taking to the board as soon as we're able to. So I want to just mention these to you. We don't have official positions on them yet, but AB 845 provides a rebuttable presumption that any disability retirement that's being sought based on a COVID-19 diagnosis, it's presumed to have occurred on the job. Now, this won't have much effect on us because our disability benefits are not different for whether you became ill or injured on the job or otherwise. But that's out there. The Emerging Managers Report bill is out there. We've seen this in the past. This one is looking for reports on our investments in emerging and diverse managers. GR9 is the resolution to support the federal bill I mentioned on the previous slide. And then there is a bill that has a federal committee address climate financial risk. And so this is something that our investments is very focused on and making sure the reporting is consistent on these financial risks due to the impacts of climate change. And so we're going to be taking that to the board when we can as well. And last but not least, I'll mention we've talked about appeals regulations in the past. We've talked about statute of limitations and proposals related to those. So for statute of limitations, it was a legislative proposal, and we continue to work on those internally. We have a project established that's moving through what all of the details of those will be, and wanted to let you know that's ongoing. And then as soon as we have something that we're able to share with the group, we'll go ahead and do that. And that is all I have to share today. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, I will hand it back over to Kim and Diane.
I don't see any raised hands or any Q&As. So thanks, Joycelyn.
Thank you.
Right. With that, we will bring in David Lamro to talk through the employer contribution rates that that staff will be making recommendations to our board. This year in particular, lots of moving parts related to new authority provided in the funding plan. And so we wanted to really make sure that folks understood all of those different moving parts, some of which are new and will be continuing on a going forward basis. So with that, I'll turn over to David.
Thank you, Diane. If you can go to the next slide, please. So first I want to just remind everyone, Diane mentioned the CalSTRS funding plan. In June, it's going to be 7 years that the legislature adopted our funding plan. And just as a reminder, as you well know, the employer contribution rate was increased through the funding plan. And the main thing I want to highlight is, if you look on the right-hand side of the chart, for the last 2 years, the state has actually been helping employers by paying part of the employer rate to CalSTRS. We call that a rate subsidy. So the rate that you are currently paying to CalSTRS this year is lower than what was intended by the funding plan. The next slide, please. And just to show you, originally when the funding plan was passed, employers were scheduled to pay 19.1% of payroll to CalSTRS this fiscal year. And the state paid about 3%, 2.95%, which led to that net employer rate of 16.15 that employers are currently paying this year. And that's important to know because if you go to the next slide, please. Now we're entering the period of our funding plan where for the first time in the history of CalSTRS, our board will be setting the employer contribution rate. So that will be on June 9th when we have a meeting. Our board will be deciding on what the employer rate will be for 21-22. And there are some limits as to what our board can do as per the parameters of the funding plan, but roughly our board cannot make any adjustment up or down by more than 1%. So our starting point this year will be the 19.1% that's in the funding plan. And the key thing for all of you to remember is there is still a rate subsidy that is in statute. So the state has already paid on behalf of the employers 2.18% of the rate. So whatever our board decides, the employers will pay 2.18% less. Can you go to the next slide? And if you're interested in what we're going to be talking to our board mostly in June when we talk about the employer contribution rate, will be sort of what we've seen for the last few months about, most of you may have heard, we've seen increased retirements at CalSTRS, which has led to what we now see as a kind of either a flat or declining teacher payroll, which is key because what we're really trying to do here by collecting employer contributions is we're trying to eliminate what the funding plan calls the employer share of our unfunded liability. So we're really looking for a specific dollar amount each year to pay it off. And since we collect the contributions as a percentage of payroll, when the payroll either declines or does not increase, it puts our board in the position of potentially having to raise the contribution rate just to collect the same amount of money. So just want to let you know that's what we'll talk to our board about in June. And the last thing I want to show you will be what we're going to be asking our board to vote on in June. So if you can go to the next slide. So because our board has the ability to set the rate, we're actually going to be presenting our board with 3 options, all within the parameters of the funding plan. And the main thing 2 things I want you to look at here, if you look at the middle line, that's the rate subsidy that's in effect. So we know the state has already paid 2.18% on behalf of the employers. So what we're really going to be asking our board, we're going to be showing them 3 options. One of them will be to keep the employer rate to where it is as per the funding plan, which is 19.1%. That's option 3. Then we're going to be providing the board with 2 options to potentially lower the employer rate from the funding plan rate. And what you really need to care about are the numbers at the bottom, what the net rate will be for the employers in 21-22. We're going to be recommending that our board keeps the rate at 19.1, which would result in the employers having to pay 16.91%, which for all of you would be higher than what you currently pay. So if the board goes with our recommendation, then the rate you pay to CalSTRS will go up by about 0.77% for next fiscal year. Option 2 would be an increase as well, a little bit less. And if the board goes with option 1, it will be just below 16%. But we are recommending an increase, not an increase, but we're recommending option 3, mostly because of what we see for the future, based on what we've seen with where we are with the payroll so far this year. We think that the employer rate for the next few years is likely going to remain around 19%. So that's why we're going to recommend that our board keeps it there. So for you, the main thing to watch for is if our board adopts option 3 with a rate of 16.92, what to watch for is actually for 22-23, because right now, that rate subsidy of 2.18% is scheduled to go away on June 30th of 22. So unless the legislature adopts or the state helps pay the employer rate again for another year, just by itself, the rate that you all pay to CalSTRS would go up by 2.18% for 22-23, just because that rate subsidy is scheduled to expire at that time. So really, so all of these, that discussion will take place on June 9th with our board. And then the moment that our board adopts a rate, we will let all of you know right away, because we understand this year is kind of you won't have a lot of time to prepare, because our May meeting did not occur. It was postponed until June. So that will be from the moment our board adopts the rate, that contribution rate will go into effect 21 days later. So we will let everyone know the moment our board has adopted a rate. And I believe we have a letter ready to go out the moment our board takes action. And that's all I wanted to talk about today. Again, main thing is we're going to be recommending a rate of about 17% for July 1st of next year. And then what you have to watch for is for 22-23, potentially a 2% increase, because the rate subsidy will expire. With this, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, David. We actually had a question coming from Dory, and it really gets to the sort of some of the fundamental mechanics of the funding plan itself. And she was asking about returns on investments in fiscal year 2021 and how that plays in with option 3, since the markets and the portfolio have performed so well.
So yeah, I forgot to mention.
Fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yes. So we are having so far an incredible year. So I'm knocking on wood everywhere here. It could potentially be the highest return we've seen since the funding plan was passed. But our funding plan is extremely complicated. We have mentioned to several of our stakeholders for the last few years on our board that from the employer's perspective, one of the good things of the funding plan is the employer contribution rate is not necessarily impacted, is not very volatile, and doesn't move much with the investment return. Most of that burden or benefit, depending how you look at it, falls upon the state. So generally, the state contribution rate will go up quite a bit if we earn less than 7, and will go down as well if we earn more than 7. For the employers, the employer rate is not impacted greatly by investment performance, but one of the complicated aspects of our funding plan is generally when we earn more than 7, it tends to slightly increase the employer rate. I know it probably doesn't make sense to most of you. It's just the way our funding plan was built. There are certain parameters in the funding plan that result in this. So I think the main thing to remember is the employer rate is not really impacted greatly by what we see this year. But when it will be potentially a need for a very small increase in the employer rate, which is another reason why we are recommending that our board goes with option 3. Is what we're seeing this year is likely going to slightly drive up future employer rates. I hope that answers your question. It will be a very long answer if I try to explain to you why it's behaving this way. It was actually highlighted as part of a report from the Legislative Analyst Office, LAO, that they issued in March around ideas to, I think they called their report Strengthening the CalSTRS Funding Plan. And they highlighted in their report the counterintuitive nature of the employer rate when it comes to investment return. So it is a feature of our funding plan. It just doesn't make sense, but that's how it works.
One thing I want to add, for those of you that are used to seeing our directive or the circular regarding the new rate for the year, that's obviously has to wait as well, since that decision was pushed off until the board meeting in June. So as David mentioned, we will have that circular ready to go as soon as that decision is made. Those numbers will get plugged in, and we will get that out to you and post an announcement on SO as well.
And I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you very much. So I think we are moving, we're going to move to retirement readiness, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to ask Gina Eversley to jump in. We've already mentioned retirement readiness once today. So let me just put in a plug for why we asked Gina to come and present today. We know that folks are and employers are really focused right now on ending the school year and wrapping up all of the year end accounting and into both CalSTRS as well as CalPERS. But once we get through that year end, everyone immediately starts focusing on the upcoming and new school year. And so as employers are thinking about that, CalSTRS can be a resource to your employees, especially your new employees or newly transferred to the district employees who are filling out the initial paperwork for the first time, or maybe reviewing that paperwork that's been on file for a couple of years, making tweaks or making adjustments. And it's, again, may get questions about their specific benefit. And again, we just want folks to know CalSTRS has resources. Our entire branch, our retirement readiness branch, is available to provide that one-on-one assistance to members, as well as group sessions and webinars to, again, help broaden the understanding of what their retirement benefit is, so that they can plan and prepare and continue to be excited about that retirement benefit, whether it is 20 years away or 2 years away. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Gina.
All right. What an intro. Thank you so much, Diane. I am Gina Eversley. I oversee 3 units here in retirement readiness. The most pertinent is our program development unit. And we just wanted to make you aware that we haven't gone anywhere. We are still serving our members in a virtual environment. As a matter of fact, we have developed new products, adapted, improved products to ensure that our members are served. Next slide, please. Sorry. One of the big things that we immediately started doing in this unique environment we're in is we adapted our in-person workshops into webinars, and we kicked up our events for California educators. You'll notice here on this slide, we offer a new Educator Day. We did this in 2020 in October, and we actually are seeing high attendance comparative to the in-person workshops. You'll notice here we had 215 attendees learning about their retirement benefits, and 124 that explored additional savings, supplemental savings to the defined benefit. We will be conducting a similar event in 2021 in December, so you can let your employees know about that. Next slide, please. It's also important to know that CalSTRS retirement readiness is really, we keep our finger on the pulse of retirement security. And in October, there is National Retirement Security Month. In 2021, we will hold a similar event to this. And as you can see here, it isn't just about CalSTRS defined benefit, my retirement system benefits and decisions. You will also notice that we have supplemental savings webinars, Start Saving Now. We have financial awareness series that was adapted into webinar format. And when we're open, also in person. So that would be the Save for Your Future. Now, it's noteworthy for you to be aware that in the financial awareness series, we are not discussing defined benefit, rehashing CalSTRS benefits and services, but actually covering financial awareness topics, savings and investing, those kinds of things. So if your employees aren't aware that this is an offering that CalSTRS has, send them on over to us, point them in our direction. You'll also notice market volatility. This is a webinar that our defined contribution side of the house in retirement readiness came up, developed here in this environment to help ease members' concerns and help them sort through the ups and downs. Yes, we're in and up, but members have concerns about market volatility. So please know that we have that there and point them toward it. And as you can see here, these numbers on webinar attendance, they're pretty high. I would say comparative to the in-person, we have found that your employees are really tapping into our services and actually attending because it's so much easier for them instead of getting in the car and driving to our location. Next slide, please. So one of the big initiatives, I'll say, that retirement readiness is working on, and as employers, you probably experience questions from this audience. We are really ramping up our tools for part-time educators. We went in, took the part-time educator workshop, revamped it, developed it into a webinar to offer for this group. And I would venture a guess that as employers, this is an audience that you frequently get questions from. So please point them in our direction. One of the things that provoked my presence here is the fact that not only did we revamp the part-time educator webinar, but we developed a part-time educator webpage on CalSTRS.com that your employees can tap into. And we are also currently in development of topical-based webinars as employers. What the first one we have on the list is Consolidation of Benefits. And this is a topic that oftentimes as employers, they're coming to you, asking you questions. So as partners, let's go ahead, send them on over to us so that we can help them, which in turn helps you for sure. The part-time educator day that we had in January was very successful. And to that end, we are offering a full, I'll call it a week. It spans in June from June 15th through June 24th. So as employers, if you have part-time educators bombarding you with questions, by all means, point them, make them aware that we will have this event in June. Next slide, please. You know, oftentimes, employers, our members, think they don't need to contact us until it's time for retirement. We actually want to see them when they're brand new and when they are nearing retirement to that end, in February, we actually conducted a near retirement event. You can see the numbers here are quite high, which gives us hope and hopefully will help slow down some of the questions that you all get. You'll notice the offerings here. Again, we're looking at My Retirement Decisions, which is the basics, nuts and bolts of CalSTRS benefits. But you will also notice that we have two of the financial awareness series, Plan for Your Future and Protect Your Future. I'm really trying to get the word out on this series. So as employers, our partners with CalSTRS, if you can make them aware that CalSTRS does offer this, I personally would be very grateful because it really does help your employees and our membership better understand and really help them to secure their financial future. Next slide, please. Okay, spring into retirement. As employers, as CalSTRS employees ourselves, we know that our members, it comes spring, around March, April, our CalSTRS members are really looking at retirement, thinking about retirement. We try to get ahead of that curve and offer a spring into retirement event. You'll notice here, and this helps both of us, employers and CalSTRS, the fact that we offer the online service retirement application demonstration and the paper, because within that, we also review, assist with that express benefit report. So if you have employees come in asking about that, please make them aware of this event that we conduct in spring. In 2022, it will be in March and April as well. Next slide, please. And you'll notice a theme here. We help our members at different stages. And one of them is that mid-career, middle of the road. They're not new educators. They're not getting ready to retire. I want to point out that when we do these events in May, we just completed one, we added a new product. You'll notice here, mid-career educator, learn and discover. We are engaging your employees, our members, in more of our online tools, showing them where they can find information instead of maybe coming into you asking about CalSTRS. We're really attempting to teach them how to fish, know where to go to get those answers. That new webinar really helps to walk them through the tools that are available to them 24/7, as well as, of course, learning about their benefits. Am I saving enough? Again, looking at, okay, do you have supplemental savings? And of course, the financial awareness series. Overall, regardless of their career stage, I mentioned with part-time educators, we are doing topical based that pertains specifically to them. But we recently charged our program development area to develop some topical based standard CalSTRS webinars that are shorter, more digestible. So those will be coming in the future. We already have educational videos. So as employers, if you are getting questions about CalSTRS and you're really feeling like you want to point your employees to something, please know that educational videos do exist on CalSTRS.com. That is all I have for you. Lots of good stuff, I hope. Hopefully you'll get some nuggets, to help you out when they come in there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks,
No?
Gina.
Absolutely.
And again, we just wanted to give folks the opportunity and awareness that, again, there's all kinds of partnership opportunity, again, for the benefit of the employees and CalSTRS members. So again, happy to share that workload with you guys today. So again, my preamble to introduce Gina was really focused on looking forward to the start of the new school year, but obviously that opportunity for partnership can span, of course, across the entire school year. But as you think about starting the new school year and that new employee orientation, what that may or may not look like, again, we are a resource for you guys. Well, it looks like, Kim, we've got a couple of questions. I just saw
one from April Casey. Gina, do you provide special assistance to the part-time community college instructors who need to better understand how their final compensation is determined? It can get complicated.
Absolutely. That is covered in the base part-time educator webinar that we do. I also asked program development to create a fact sheet that is available on the part-time educator webpage that helps to sort them through that. And I believe it was April that asked the question. I'm happy to say that one of the topical-based webinars is covering multiple assignments, both service credit as well as final compensation. That is on our list in development, so it is coming. But until that webinar is made available, please keep in mind the fact sheet exists. Our member handbook has a lot of awesome information. And overall, with these part-time educator events that we do have question and answer component to that really does help this audience sort through that. Thank you for asking. Great question.
We have another one from Allison Britton. Gina, did you say that the retirement readiness team was planning to continue to hold webinars online past the pandemic?
Absolutely, Allison. And I think the numbers, which is why we wanted to show you all the numbers really demonstrate that our membership is enjoying the convenience of webinars. So without a doubt, retirement readiness, when we open back up, we also know our members do want to see us face to face. We will continue with offering webinars, virtual events, in-person events, because it's all about what the members need. And so definitely.
Gina, I'm not sure if you have a moment, but Vina is asking to refresh how the benefit of part-time instructors of community colleges is calculated. Is that something you can do for us quickly?
Yes, of course. I'll keep it and simple and digestible. It is the same formula. There isn't a separate formula. Service credit, age factor, final compensation. The key piece to remember for part-time educators is with final compensation. When we calculate that, it is a weighted average. And this creates a lot of concern for our part-time educators and provokes them to come into their employers and saying, what am I getting paid for this assignment? What am I getting paid for this assignment? That would be a time to point them to our resources. And why, frankly, we have a specific part-time educator webinar, and we're creating those topical base. I hope that helped. It was clear.
Yeah, thanks, Gina.
Absolutely.
You've answered her question. We really appreciate you coming to our meeting and sharing all this information. I know you guys do so much that a lot of times our employer partners don't get an opportunity to see, so it's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Kim, do you want to introduce Alex?
Yeah.
Or
No, I've got it. So moving on, we're going to be moving to employer services, our training services team, Alex Milkey. And he's going to be joining us and talking about something you all have been asking for, which is working after retirement. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it. And I think that this presentation is really appropriate to follow up with our retirement readiness presentation, because, just as you are communicating to your members about how to get ready for retirement, how to save, this presentation we're going to be going over is actually on working after retirement, in the instance where a CalSTRS member who retires might want to come back and work at a school district to get some more money in retirement. So I think that's very appropriate and also applicable, given that, the end of the year is approaching and retirements. Had a lot of teachers retire this year. So yeah, thank you for that introduction, Kim. And with that being said, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A when I do pauses throughout the presentation. This is going to be one of the longer ones of the day, but don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to get to everything you want to ask. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into our objectives. So the first thing we're going to look at is defining what are defined benefit member and cash balance participant activities. Basically, this is really similar to creditable service for active members, except we're going to be looking at it as it pertains to retired members. And there's some slight differences that you need to be aware of. But for the most part, this is going to be very similar to creditable service that you're all very familiar with. We're also going to describe the separation from service requirement. Those of you that are experienced with these retirees know that there's a window that's 180 calendar days that retired members should not be returning to work in, generally speaking. So we'll take a look at that. We're also going to look at the earnings limitation and the impacts of exceeding the limit. And this is something that will come up periodically throughout the presentation as well. But this is very relevant to educate your members on so that they don't unknowingly affect their retirement benefit by returning to work. And the last thing we're going to look at, which is something I hinted at already, and is explaining your responsibilities as the employer, because we actually rely on you in this area a lot to communicate to retired members to ensure that they don't adversely do something to their monthly retirement check by, reinstating or returning to work in some capacity. So with that being said, the first thing we're going to look at is the working after retirement criteria. So how do you determine whether a CalSTRS member is, quote, working after retirement? What does that look like? Well, there's really just two things that you have to remember as far as, sort of a checklist. The first one is to look at the employee's employment capacity. So this is the first thing you want to look at. So the first employment capacity is basically the same as the employer, criteria for determining whether a position is considered creditable service to CalSTRS or not. And that's where you determine if they're an employee of an employer, which includes the K through 12 school districts, county offices of ed, charter schools, community college districts, and those rare joint powers authorities that may come up from time to time. So again, this is no different than creditable service at this point, exactly the same. But here is where you start to run into some differences for CalSTRS members who are retired that return to work. So if they're employed as independent contractors or as employees of a third-party staffing agency, for example, we might actually want to have their earnings reported to CalSTRS. So this is something to keep in mind, and again, makes it distinct from normal creditable service. Now, with these three in mind, we do want to make you aware of one exclusion for employees that return under third-party agencies. This is something that the law sets out and provides, and this applies to members who are employees of third-party agencies if their assignment is less than 24 months, and if their employer that they're working for, that third-party employer, doesn't participate in another California public pension system, and if that employee is not going to be performing activities that are normally performed by CalSTRS covered positions. Now, if you're like me, you're probably looking at these three criteria and thinking to yourself, trying to theorize a sort of position that, maybe falls under this exclusion. And then, you don't have to worry about reporting their earnings to CalSTRS in retirement. So something I'll let you know is that we've actually never seen an example of this to this date, even though the law provides for this exemption. So if you do have a position that a retiree returns to work in and that you think meets all three of these criteria, I encourage you to actually reach out to us, and we could include it as an example in this slideshow as well. So anyway, reach out to us with that. So the next thing we're going to look at is the second point of determining whether you should report your retired member's earnings to CalSTRS or not. Remember, the first one was the basis of employment, which is exactly the same as creditable service, but also includes the independent contractors and employees of third-party agencies. So the next thing you want to do is you want to look at the duties and the activities they're performing, which we call the retired defined benefit member and cash balance participant activities. And again, for those that are familiar with creditable service, this is going to be a cakewalk because these activities are exactly the same as those activities that an active CalSTRS member would perform to be considered performing creditable service. So you got your teacher, you've got your vocational counselor, your research, program research and development, your health services, social services, and yes, even Outgrowth can be considered retired member activity. So where we're at now, all we've looked at is whether your employees have gotten into a position that requires their earnings to be reported to CalSTRS. So all you need to remember again is the basis of employment and whether they're looking or whether they're performing any of these activities. So with that being said, before I hop into the impacts of working after retirement, what questions do you have about determining whether your employees are actually performing a retired member activity? All right, looks like we're good to go ahead. So as I mentioned earlier, it's not just a free-for-all as far as retired members returning to work after they retire with CalSTRS. There are several impacts of returning to work that could affect them that you definitely want to be aware of as an employer, and that you also want to make sure the employees are aware of. Vina, I see that you put a question in the Q&A. CalSTRS retirees cannot work in Outgrowth activities only. Please confirm. So I think what you're hinting at, Vina, is that if a retiree is, if you hire them just to, for example, at a K through 12 district, work as the student yearbook advisor, which is something we typically see as, potentially being an Outgrowth activity. If that's all they're doing and they're not performing any other retired member activities or any, other creditable service activities, then no, that would not be reportable to CalSTRS. You wouldn't report those earnings. Just as in it's the same situation as if an active member does Outgrowth. You only report the earnings if they're performing other creditable service activities. And thank you, Vina, for your question. So hopefully that clarified that for you. Rosanna, hey, good to see you, or, see your name in the chat. What is a retired activity participates in grant work? Okay. Participating in grant funding, new curriculum review, focus groups. So I guess maybe to clarify in that question, it seems like maybe the funding is coming from somewhere else, from some sort of grant. Again, as far as we're concerned with reporting activities and such, okay, you say confirm that. So we're not as concerned with where the funding is coming from, just as long as, we're looking at those two criteria I mentioned, the basis of employment and the activity that the member is performing. So I won't, give you a definitive answer, right? Because I'm not looking at the duties of this curriculum review or focus group, but it sounds like that's probably being performed for an employer, and that might fall under the retired member activity of curriculum review. So it seems like that might be something that, you would want to report those earnings to CalSTRS, but I would send in that documentation to employerhelp@calstrs.com to get a concrete answer there. No problem, Rosanna. Thanks for asking. Okay, Julia, if we're hiring a third-party vendor and the team they send are 2 CalSTRS retirees, but the work does not require a credential, nor is it work that we could hire directly as an employee, do we report the retiree earnings? So the second part of maybe your first sentence there is, nor is it work that we could hire directly as an employee. You clarify what you mean by that. Are you saying that this wouldn't be work that would normally be performed by one of your employees or an active CalSTRS member? Is that what you're referring to, Julia? Yeah, so it's a good question. So it sounds like you're hinting at maybe the exclusion that we looked at for the third-party vendors and employees of those. So yeah, I think that this is a situation where I would recommend reaching out, because as I mentioned, we have never seen a position that meets all 3 of those criteria before. So yeah, again, this is one that we'd like to look at if you want to send in that documentation to employerhelp@calstrs.com. So James, coaching is an outgrowth activity. And Lucinda, I'll repeat Vina's question in just a second. Coaching is an outgrowth activity, but doesn't require a credential. So it's technically a classified position. Does this restrict a STRS retiree from working in per ed code? All right, James. So, and again, I want to clarify something too. When we talk about coaching as an outgrowth activity, we're usually referring to K through 12 districts, charter schools, and not community college districts, because coaches at community college districts are usually just considered creditable service on their own. So the situation you're referring to is probably referencing some of the restrictions that are placed on CalSTRS retirees returning to work in what are considered classified positions, or positions that normally are reported to CalPERS. So the situation you're talking about, it would depend on, James, can you confirm, are you with a charter school? Or what employer are you with? K through 12. Right, so more often than not, we see those coaching positions typically, if they're being performed in conjunction with other creditable service activities, that's going to be a CalSTRS covered position. If you consider those coaching positions classified at your district, it might be something that you want to, reach out to CalPERS about, as far as determining whether that is a position that they would normally consider classified. And then again, you may want to get in contact with us as well by sending that documentation over, because in most cases at K through 12 districts, we do see sports coaches and their work being considered a creditable service activity that is covered by CalSTRS. And Lucinda, so Vina's question, let me go back and look at the answered questions real quick, because I've already answered so many that let me see. Vina, thank you. I'm looking. Yeah, I'm going to try to remember, because I can't quite remember the question already. I'm already blanking. I think it had to do with outgrowth.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I believe it had to do with outgrowth activity.
Okay. Thanks, Diane.
The question was, can a CalSTRS retiree work in an outgrowth activity only?
Okay. There we go. Yeah. So again, it's not to get all grammatical and everything, but they can. So they of course can work in, what would normally be considered solely, an outgrowth activity. So Vina was asking if whether employees who are only performing something like coaching at a K through 12 district or, robotics club advisor at a K through 12 district, if someone's performing only that activity and not doing other creditable service, would that be creditable, or would that be compensation that's reportable in retirement? To which the answer would be no. The same rules apply basically in that situation for active CalSTRS members that apply to retired CalSTRS members. You need to look at whether they're performing other creditable activities in the same fiscal year for the same employer. And Vina, we call them short-term employees hired for a specific assignment and are not regular employees. They're paid a stipend. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. If you want to expand on that a little bit, I know that earlier you had maybe a question about a specific situation pertinent to Orange County. So if that's the case, then I would encourage you to, get on that email and start chatting us up so we can walk you through your specific situation. All right. So with that being said, I think we've still got plenty of time. I'm going to pop back over to our presentation. Cindy, I'll get to you in a little bit. Don't worry. We can leave that question there. I'll get through this. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to get through the content, and then I will return to your question there, but I do see you. So thank you. So let's look at some of the impacts of working after retirement. Getting back on track to the presentation, we just looked at how to determine whether your employees are performing retired member activities. So these are the consequences that you need to be aware of. So the first impact, or the first kind of just situation you need to be aware of, is that retirees don't pay contributions to CalSTRS. So, and this applies to employees receiving annuities from cash balance program or receiving a monthly retirement check through the defined benefit program. And this thing makes sense, right? Because CalSTRS retirees aren't getting service credit. They're not building up a retirement benefit anymore. They're already retired, so they're not going to pay contributions on their earnings. In addition to that, they don't earn additional CalSTRS benefits. They can't work towards, getting that 30-year age credit, the 30-year, or the 25-year, 1-year final comp, that type of thing. And they're not working towards those additional benefits. Now, here's another criteria or another impact. Is that when you hire a CalSTRS retiree, you need to make sure that their pay is commensurate with that of active members or other retirees that are doing that work. So just make sure that they're being paid the same as everyone else. And again, I see your question there, Lucinda. I'll get to that in just a moment. So with that being said, I think that those first three criteria are ones that make sense to a lot of people. You look at that and you're like, okay, I got that checked out. They're not paying contributions. They got to get paid the same as everyone else. Now, this next impact, which is the separation from service requirement, is one that can make a big difference for a member and could even negatively impact their benefit if they're not aware of this, which applies to both defined benefit and cash balance retirees. So this is something to be keenly aware of. Let's take a look at what it involves. So the law states that CalSTRS retirees must have a bona fide separation from service before performing retired member activities. And bona fide, it's kind of a fun phrase there. But what the law clarifies bona fide means is 180 calendar days. Now, technically, an employee or a CalSTRS retiree could return to work and perform a retired member activity within that 180-day window. The issue is that they're going to negatively impact their CalSTRS benefit if they do that and start to earn money that gets reported to us. So, that being said, let's take a look at how this actually impacts their benefit. And for this, we're going to be specifically looking at those receiving benefits through the defined benefit program or annuities through the cash balance program. And I see your question there, Victoria, too. Don't worry, we'll get a spot for a pause in just a moment. So in a case where a CalSTRS retiree returns to work within their 180-day separation from service window, their benefits are going to be reduced. And in this example, let's say a retiree is getting $6,000 a month with their retirement check. Now they return to work within that 180-day window and make $8,000. Well, the consequence of that is that they're basically going to be working for free, because within that 180-day window, every cent that they earn is going to be collected back from CalSTRS. And the way that's going to happen is that we're going to collect $6,000 from their next retirement check after we see that $8,000 reported. And then we're going to collect the additional $2,000 from their following retirement check and reduce it there. So again, obviously can have some large consequences for CalSTRS retirees. So they should definitely be aware of this. Now, as far as retirees who elect to receive a cash balance lump sum payment, typically those lump sum payments, or always actually, they're not released until 180 days after they separate from service and retire. In the case that a cash balance retiree returns to work within that 180-day window, they're actually going to cancel that payment. So again, they're going to be impacted as well if they return to work within that 180-day window. So that was the separation from service requirement. And before I get into some of the questions, I want to take a look at the exemption for this, because I feel like these two topics are pretty much conjoined at the hip, right? Just like we have the requirement for this, we also want to look at the exemption. So I'll get through this and then I'll address some of these questions and see how we're doing. So some of you are familiar with this, and those that aren't are probably thinking to yourselves, is there any exemption to this 100-day requirement? And there is actually. So that exemption is specified and walked through on the SR 1897 form. And this form is available on the Secure Employer website under reference items. You can look it up by the name there and you'll be able to find it. Now, this form has very specific instructions as far as the things that need to take place in order to get an exemption for a specific employee for returning to work in a position that would normally be considered a retired member activity. So reference that form for details on this. And additionally, CalSTRS published a circular, I believe in 2016, volume 32, issue 3, that specifies all the criteria that need to be met in order to obtain this exemption, and will walk you through completing this process. And just a caveat I want to throw out with this one is that even if an employee receives the exemption for being able to come back within the 180 calendar days after they retire, their earnings are still subject to the annual earnings limitation, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So with that being said, I'm going to take a look at some of our questions here in the chat and make sure that we can address these. So Cindy, outgrowth coaching at K through 12 is not reportable, but outgrowth coaching at CCD is reportable if no other service is being performed. So Cindy, yeah. So if I don't know if you work at, I think your name is familiar to me. I want to say maybe Butte County. I'm not sure, maybe not. But anyway, yes. Oh, cool. All right. So for community college districts, they're a little bit different as far as coaching is concerned. And I won't get too much into the weeds, but basically you need to know that their requirements for determining what positions are reportable to CalSTRS are different. They have their own separate handbook called the Minimum Qualifications Handbook. That's very thorough and very comprehensive. And coaching is actually included in there as one of the positions. So we don't see that as being an outgrowth at a community college district. In fact, it's very rare that we see outgrowth at community college districts at all. So thank you for your question. Lucinda, so if a retiree works in outgrowth and we don't report the retiree earnings to CalSTRS, that's what most of our retirees do. So Lucinda, that only refers to a situation where that retiree is not performing any other creditable service or retired member activities. So if you have a retired member that's doing what would normally be outgrowth, and that's it, that's all they're doing, you don't need to report those earnings to CalSTRS. But if they're doing any other retired member activity, like reviewing curriculum, I know Rosanna brought that up, or if they're doing some program research, or if they're teaching just a couple hours a week, doing something small like that, then you would want to report those earnings because that would be considered outgrowth at that point. So Victoria, we can't control the rate of pay for third-party retirees with reportable retired member activities. How does this square with requirement to pay no more or less than active members? Interesting. So, Victoria, that's an interesting situation. It depends. So if the third party agency is paying them, that's going to be kind of an interesting situation there, right? Because if you're not directly paying them as the district, that's kind of a disconnect between, what your payroll might be reporting to CalSTRS and what the member's receiving. That's a situation where I think we would want to work with you one-on-one to resolve that and make sure that the earnings are tracked accurately for those retirees. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it. And then Teresa, I see you asking for a link. I hope you could find that. If anyone's familiar or able to find that, we could. Maybe we'll send it in the email after, and we'll include that there for you, Teresa. So thank you for asking that as well. And Victoria, I see it's through SELPA. We don't pay the contractor directly. So yeah, I think that, again, this is something that we do want to address probably offline because this is a specific situation. But I appreciate that you're thinking ahead to this and that these questions are being brought up for you just to make sure that things are done accurately. So again, thank you for asking that. And I would encourage you to reach out. All right. Let me take a sip real quick and we'll get back into our presentation. Looks like we're still good on time, so no worries there. All right, so this next one I want to address is the annual earnings limitation, which is something that we've referenced a number of times already throughout this presentation. And for this only applies to members who are retired under the defined benefit program, not to members receiving a cash balance annuity or lump sum. Now, this annual earnings limitation generally goes into effect, when the member returns to work after their 180-day separation from service. So let's say, they were aware of that. They didn't return to work because they didn't want to work for free, and they come back. Well, they can work in a retired member activity, but all the compensation that they earn for those retired member activities is going to need to be reported to CalSTRS. And the reason is that there's a limit on how much compensation they can earn before their benefit starts to be reduced. And they can earn up to that annual earnings limit with no problems. But as soon as they get over that limit, that's when they're going to encounter issues. This limit is something that's changed annually or adjusted annually. And I believe a directive was published maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago containing the new limit for fiscal year 21 through 22, which I think is around $48,000. So that'll be the limit for it next year. And I see some questions coming in chat. We'll get to those in just a moment. So with that being said, how does this, we're going to also, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was going to get into an example, but I actually want to let you know about something that CalSTRS does to assist members with understanding this annual earnings limitation, which is the post-retirement earnings letters that are generated by our system. So the system that we have will generate a letter and send it to the member, notifying them of the annual earnings limitation as soon as we see that any earnings were reported for them in retirement. And this will notify them of the limit and let them know that they need to be, watching out for that and not to go over it. In addition to that, we also send out a letter midway when they reach the halfway cap of the annual earnings limitation. So next year, if a member got to $24,000 of retired member earnings, we'd send out that letter to them automatically. Now, though these letters are really helpful for members, I want to mention that these aren't solely to be relied on, and we need you as the employer to help with this because, again, by the time we see retiree earnings, it could be 2 months even after they actually receive that paycheck, as far as it getting into our system and then even sending out this letter. So we don't want there to be any delays with the members knowing about them approaching this limit. So these letters are helpful, but we shouldn't rely on these as well. So that being said, let's look at what happens if that member does receive or does go over the annual compensation threshold. So if this occurs, then earnings are going to be collected from their monthly retirement check. And similar to the 180-day threshold, once they surpass that limit, it's going to just be a dollar for dollar reduction, and they're virtually going to be working for free. Something else that I I want to mention too, as far as these retired member earnings are concerned, which is something that distinguishes what you would report for this, that's distinct from an active CalSTRS member, is earnings that are associated with payments for getting healthcare benefits or participating in some retirement plan. Normally for active CalSTRS members, those sorts of payments are called out by the law as fringe benefits, and you don't report those to CalSTRS. But if you have a CalSTRS retiree working for you that is performing retired member activities, if you pay them money to go and get some health benefits on top of whatever you're paying them for salary, then that's actually going to be reportable compensation to CalSTRS as well, and that does apply towards their annual earnings limitation. So I just wanted to give that sidebar because I think that was kind of interesting and important to note, a situation that distinguishes retired member earnings from earnings of active members. So back on the topic of the annual earnings limitation, we do collect those excess earnings and there's no exemption from this. So unlike the 180-day separation from service requirement, there's no exemption to the $48,000 limit next year that's going to come into effect or any other limit that has ever existed. No questions asked. Now, I'm going to quickly look at an example of what happens should the CalSTRS retiree exceed that earnings limitation. For this example, we're going to take a look at the limit for fiscal year 17-18, which was $43,000, or $43,755, excuse me. So we've got a member, Miss Geller, who earns $45,000 for performing retired member activities. But you see that the sirens are going off, right? They've exceeded the earnings limitation. So the way that this works is that everything beyond that earnings limit, we're actually going to collect back from them from their future retirement benefit checks. So in her next check, we're going to collect back the difference of $1,245. And if Miss Geller continues to work any more during that fiscal year and earn over that limit, she's going to be working for free and sending all the money that she makes back to CalSTRS. So hopefully that example clarifies a little bit about this annual earnings limit. Now, before we get into the last impact, I'll take a moment to look at some of the questions that came in the chat. So Vina's asking, a CalSTRS retiree cannot work in a classified position except instructional aid. You're referring to one of the exemptions there. I believe maybe for that. Can they still be a walk-on coach? So by walk-on coach, Vina, I would have guessed that you mean that that's all they're doing, that they're coaching. So that's a situation where you're going to want to contact CalPERS about that, because if the employee is just coaching, then we're not concerned about that either, right? Because that's not going to be reported to us no matter what the circumstances, because it's not outgrowth. It's not being performed in addition with another activity that's creditable. So that would be a situation where you would want to contact CalPERS or maybe the Department of Education, I believe, to see if there's going to be issues with the retiree performing what you maybe consider classified service. Nancy Chow asks, is this post-retirement letter only sent when there are earnings reported? Yes, that's exactly right. So it's an automatic letter that is generated by our system as soon as it sees any reporting line come through for a retiree with, I believe, assignment code 61. It's going to trigger that and send that letter. Julia's asking, it's not up to the employer to monitor the limit, correct? Well, we are going to get there in just a moment as far as the employer requirements. So yes, I think you should be monitoring the limit for your employees. And actually, the law does require you to inform them of what they're earning throughout the course of them performing retired member activities. And the reason being is that, again, we don't see employees' earnings exactly as they're earning them. There's a delay, right? So, if someone's waiting for CalSTRS to inform the employee of the limit and how they're approaching it, then it might already be too late. They could be 2 months past and have already earned over the limit, at which point we might start collecting from their retirement check. So we actually do put some onus on you as the employer to communicate this to employees. Deepa, can you confirm retiree receives a stipend toward their health benefit cost is reportable towards the earnings limit? So Deepa, if yes, but only if the retiree you hire is performing a retired member activity, right? So only if they meet those criteria that we already talked about, they're employed by an employer or as an independent contractor, and they're performing a creditable service activity. In that case, if you're giving them an extra $200 a month to help them cover retirement or healthcare costs, then you do need to report that to CalSTRS. And Wells, if benefits are provided to retirees versus cash to pay for them, is that including in the earnings limit? Good question, Anne. So yeah, if you're just paying for your employees' healthcare and you're not actually giving it to them in cash, we don't know about that. Again, this only has to do with cash being paid to employees. Julia, follow up. We do inform the limit, but if they work other places, we would not know that as far as hitting the limit. Yeah, that's a good point, Julia. Maybe an employee is working at multiple districts and in doing that, hopefully by you communicating with them about their earnings and them understanding that they would be aware that their earnings from both districts are going to count towards that limit. So yeah, that's a good point. Just be on top of that with your employee and hopefully they could be aware to think in their mind that, both of these are being compounded on each other. And Rosanna, I thought the health benefit stipend is a fringe benefit. So that's something I mentioned a little bit before. Again, yes, for active members, absolutely, it's not reportable. But the difference is that for retired members, we want to be aware of any earnings that they're receiving that are associated with retired member activities. Looks like I opened a can of worms here. Getting real deep into this. So follow up on Deepa's question. Do we report the $200 stipend just for the months they work or for the full year? So that's going to depend on the wording of, the way that of your documentation that says how you're paying out that health benefit payment. So again, if you want to learn more about how to report that specifically, that's something I would send over to employerhelp@calstrs.com. What if they are substantiating the stipend amount with receipts? The stipend is not paid through payable. Sort of like a reimbursement, maybe. Maybe is what you're getting at. I meant through payroll. The stipend is not paid through payroll. So I'm a little bit thrown off. So I don't know I can't tell on your question if they're receiving compensation or not for the benefits. But Deepa, again, for a specific situation, I think maybe you want to reach out to employer help for that one. Cindy, cash balance retired participants can return after 100 days, 80 days, and work without limit. Exactly. Yes. So, but for that just applies to an annuity that they're receiving through the cash balance program. But yes, so their cash balance annuity is not going to be subject to any earnings limitation. All right. Cindy, but still reportable. Still reportable. Good question. That one actually, I'm actually not sure about. That one we can include in a follow-up email for you with the cash balance annuitants. All right. Now, a lot of questions are coming back in. So let me look at the time real quick. We've got about 9 minutes left in my presentation. So I'm going to quickly get through the next couple things, and then we can spend some more time on these questions. But thank you all for asking and for being so interactive. It makes me feel like this is a real in-person training, which is fun. So anyway, diving back into the presentation, we've talked about the impacts of working after retirement. Now, the last one we're going to look at is the potential to lose the 2 years of service credit associated with the CalSTRS Retirement Incentive Program. So this only applies to defined benefit retirees as well. Now, something I want to mention is that this specifically refers to the CalSTRS Retirement Incentive Program. This has no reference to a retirement incentive that you pay out to your employees like in a lump sum to encourage them to retire. This is specifically our program where they get 2 years of extra service credit. So a CalSTRS retiree will actually forfeit their incentive benefit if any of the following situations occur. And the first is if they take any job with the same employer that they received the incentive under. So if it's with the same employer that they got the incentive through, they could take a bus driver position, right? Not a position normally covered by CalSTRS, but it's any job. They could work in the payroll office or something. Any job with the same employer they got the incentive through, they're going to forfeit that retirement incentive. So really good to be aware of that and to inform your employees of this. Additionally, if they receive unemployment benefits within 1 year of their retirement date, this is also going to cause them to forfeit their 2 years of service credit, which makes sense, right? Retirees, you're not supposed to be working anymore. And, receiving unemployment benefits means you're searching for work. So kind of contradictory things there. So they'll forfeit their benefit if that happens. And lastly, if they reinstate to active CalSTRS membership, they will also forfeit their 2 years of service credit that they got through the CalSTRS Retirement Incentive Program. So with that being said, this is a lot to keep track of. There's a number of things to know and a lot of things that not only you as the employee need to be aware of, but that the employee needs to be aware of as well. So I think real quick, I'm going to go through these last slides on employer responsibilities as far as working after retirement. And then I'm going to go back to your questions. So don't worry, I see those coming in. So I've been kind of talking about this already. I've been making references to this throughout the presentation, but we really rely on you to communicate the separation from service requirement, the earnings limitation, even the retirement incentive consequences to all your employees when you are potentially considering hiring a CalSTRS retired member. So in fact, the law actually requires this of you. If you're going to hire them, you got to communicate to them, hey, be aware of these. These could negatively impact your benefit if these situations occur. Now, on top of that, and this is something I've kind of been hitting on throughout the presentation, we do require you to report the earnings for retired member activities to CalSTRS. And this is going to be done with the assignment code 61, which is specifically for working after retirement, and also with the contribution code 2, which is that of a non-member, because again, we don't collect contributions on retiree earnings. And then again, hitting on something that I believe Julia asked in the chat, you are required to inform your employees of their earnings as they go along. So if an employee, if a retired member does retired member activities and gets $2,000 one month, I'll say, hey, you had $2,000, we're reporting this to CalSTRS. You're $2,000 out of the $48,000 whatever limit. Just be aware of that. All right, this is actually my last slide. So I imagine we're going to continue the conversation after this. But this is our things to consider slide, which, if anything, is a helpful checklist for you to walk through as an employer when you are considering hiring a retired CalSTRS member. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, are they performing a retired member activity? And again, that relates to that kind of two-part thing you want to check, which is the employment capacity, which also includes independent contractors and third-party agencies in retirement. And then you also want to check if the duties they're performing are in line with the creditable service activities, similar to creditable service for an active member. The next thing you want to ask yourself and also communicate to the member is, are they going to return to work within that 180-day calendar window during that separation from service timeframe? And if they are, then maybe you need to reach out for an exemption and go through that process if the situation requires it. Also, the employee needs to be informed of the earnings limitation for the year. And, maybe you could even tell right from the beginning when you're hiring a CalSTRS member that's retired, you can see that, oh, this person's going to be earning, $8,000 a month or something like that, and they're retired. They're probably going to hit that limit later on in the year. So definitely want to make them aware of that. And lastly, you want to make sure that you have the framework at your office to be able to track and report all the earnings for your employees that are performing CalSTRS retired member activities, and also to inform them of their earnings as they go. So with that being said, last slide here that I'll go ahead and leave it on is the slide where you can get resources to send questions in. So if you have questions specifically about the exemptions and limitations, such as that third-party exclusion for a retired member activity that I believe someone was asking a question about right at the beginning, you can send those to postretirement@calstrs.com, and they'll be able to work with you on that. Now, if you have questions about whether the activities that the retired member is performing is considered a retired member activity, and maybe the earnings associated with that are reportable, then you want to contact employerhelp@calstrs.com for that. You can also hit them up through secure messaging or through the employer helpline, where you'll leave a voice message and someone will be able to respond to you. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it on this slide. That's it for the presentation. I've got a couple minutes left in my time frame, or literally a couple too. So I'm going to look at the questions here, and then who knows, maybe we'll continue to address some more. But let me look here. So Anna Lambert, I see you in there. If a retiree performs CalSTRS creditable service and they receive cash for a phone stipend or car stipend, that's reportable as well? Or does it only apply to health benefits? That's a good question. So in that situation, I think if it's tied to the position, then that is something that we would want to be aware of at CalSTRS. So I think you would want to include that. If I've just spoken heresy, and someone's going to come back later and we'll confirm that in a follow-up email. Someone can come in after, but I do believe that is something we want to be aware of. And Teresa, for Deepa's issue, the employer is reimbursing the retiree for their retiree health benefits through payroll. Yeah, if they're reimbursing them, basically if any money is coming out from payroll that's associated with them performing a creditable activity, then we do want to see those as being considered earnings and reported to CalSTRS. Deepa, if a cash balance retiree takes a lump sum distribution, is there a 180-day limit? So again, going back to one of the earlier slides, so typically those lump sum distributions, there's like a waiting period of 180 days. So if they return to work within 180 days, they're actually going to cancel their ability to receive that benefit. And they're not going to be able to receive it until they wait another 180 days from the last time they worked. So basically it's going to postpone them receiving their cash balance lump sum. But yeah, there is a 180-day limit there. Teresa Cooper, retirement incentive. Any job. Does this include through a third party? Yeah. If the employee is working for the districts, if they're at that same employer, they could come into an issue where they could lose their retirement incentive. So definitely be aware of that. And again, for that specific situation, I would reach out to postretirement@calstrs.com. They're going to be your experts on, there is an email specifically. There's retirement incentive@calstrs.com. You can get even more specific with that. You can reach out to that email with questions for that. Nancy Chow. And again, I'm over my time limit already. Kim or Diane, I don't know if you can boot me off the mic or swing in if you want.
You're fine, Alex. Go ahead. Let's make sure that we get these last few answered.
Absolutely. I agree. Just wanted to, make sure I'm not going out of line here. So Nancy asks, I just learned that one of our faculty was a STRS retiree, and we have been collecting FICA and reported as a non-member. No error surfaced when we reported him since October 2019. Why? Was STRS retiree? So if you have a CalSTRS retiree working for you, and they're performing retired member activities like we discussed, if they're receiving compensation, the correct way to report that is as a non-member because we don't want to collect contributions on it. So again, compensation for performing retired member activities, that is actually the correct way to report it. And Nancy specifying they're a part-time faculty. Yeah. So if they're working for you as a part-time faculty, then and they're a retiree doing the retired member activities, then that's actually how you do it. Oh, okay. FICA equals Social Security. Thank you, Nancy. Probably something I don't know, given my, I don't know. Do I look young? Anyway, so I've been collecting Social Security. And report as a non-member. So yeah, Social Security, that's not being paid by an employer. That shouldn't be reported to CalSTRS. That's not something you're paying as the employer. If that is the case and you're reporting Social Security, like their earnings for that member, I want you to get in contact with employer help at calstrs.com about that, and they can work that out. And then I see you kind of specifying there, Nancy. I hope that helps you. Deepa, I've been told by STRS that they indicate retirement on their application and take a lump sum, then the 180-day wait period for them is waived. If you're referring to the cash balance lump sum, Deepa, that's something I'm
I feel
not.
like actually Gina might be a better person to answer this. Gina, if you're still on the call, what do you, when it comes to the lump sum for cash balance, can you help us out on that front?
I
think Gina jumped
don't
off.
think Gina's here anymore. I just scrolled through the participants.
Yeah, as far as I understand, though, the distribution is held for 180 days. So they don't actually get when they indicate that they're retiring and taking a lump sum, they won't get the money right away. They get it once that 180-day wait period passes. And if they work during that time frame, then it cancels. That 180 days has to restart.
Yep, that's exactly right. And Cindy, yeah, I see you in the chat too. Clearly familiar with CB, chiming in there. So, yep, on point with that comment. All right, Faith, health benefit reimbursement to a STRS retiree is non-reportable as long as they don't start working as a retired annuitant, correct? Once they start working, yeah. So if they're not performing retired member activities, you're not going to report compensation associated with their health benefits. But if they begin performing a retired member activity, then that's when you're going to want to start reporting that. Good question, Faith. Thank you, Teresa.
All right, before we can get too many more questions to hop in there, because you're a wealth of knowledge, we appreciate you, Alex, so much.
I'm trying.
Do you have any additional questions for on this particular topic? Please take a look at the slide that's up right now and take note of both of those email addresses. We're happy to help you, but we also want to be respectful of everybody's time and try and end our meeting on time as well. So thank you very, very much, Alex, for your fantastic presentation. I hope everybody got the answers they were looking for. I've been told this is a record number of Q&As for our our webinars so far. So and there's one to add to your resume.
There you go. There you go. Thanks, Kim. And thank you. I saw Linda and someone else. Yeah, Linda. Good to see you in the chat as well. Thank you.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to move into our what we call our open forum part of the presentation. And I actually want to start this off by bringing my counterpart, Kathleen Arceo, out to talk about some employer services business for you guys, and then we'll open it up to general questions. Kathleen?
Thank you, Kim and Diane. Employer help is our new name, and it really reflects what we're doing for our employers. Recently, we've added some things to our portfolio, including those quarterly conference calls that just completed. And I really wanted to thank everyone that participated in that. We were able to collect some trends. They're designed to address your questions in an open environment. And sometimes we bring our partners to those meetings as well to help us respond to questions. What we're trying to do is to be able to deliver to you a more targeted training and information delivery approach. So it's really important to us that you take the time to contribute. And, it was just a fantastic event. We had over 30 conference calls held during that month and a half period. I also wanted to add that we have over 20 scheduled employer trainings between now and the end of the year. We're really targeting some of our larger, more complex employers with some specific training for them, as well as our quarterly trainings, which have been very popular. We get a lot of attendees there. We also have our CBTs as well as our job aids located on Palms. So you can go into there and search for a subject and either watch a short video or look at the job aids to help you in determining how to report something. So we're really excited about it. I guess I should have said first, I'm the assistant director over employer health and training and development. And we're really looking forward to learning more about you and being more prepared to answer your questions and to serve you as our customer. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions for Kathleen on the quarterly conference calls and the other efforts that we have in reaching out to you guys?
And again, I think, Kim, didn't we, while we're waiting for some Q&A that maybe come to, some questions that may come in, I think we did introduce Kathleen at the last EAC and noted that she had been recently promoted to the assistant director position. So again, we're already starting to see some of that energy and enthusiasm really, reaching out and building that better relationship and rapport so that, again, it gets back to, you're right, the service aspect of what we want to do. So super excited to have Kathleen join us. I'm not seeing any.
No questions for Kathleen.
All right.
And Diane, did you want to?
Yeah. So
before we open the rest of
Absolutely. We keep talking over each other. Too much enthusiasm this afternoon. But I did want to also mention, Kathleen had talked about quarterly conversations and dialogues and ongoing conversation. I wanted to bring to everybody's attention that historically we've had a standing item related to pension solution. John Hammond and our employer readiness team has offered updates. And I did want to make mention that we purposely did not include that on today's agenda. And the reason for that is that we have run into some challenges, related to testing and COVID and some other things. And so we're really, at this point in time, we are really in the process of taking a full project analysis to really better understand some of the challenges. And so we expect this analysis to be completed in the early summer. And from there, we'll revise schedules and any of the planned implementation as it relates to going live. So we did want to just, again, let folks know we are internally reviewing. We are committed and remain, as we always have, to releasing a high quality product. It is the largest IT project CalSTRS has ever undertaken, but we really want to ensure that the enhanced functionality and the self-service tools to both our employers and the membership are really there and really do work well as designed. And that online functionality and minimizing the manual processes really can be part of that go live. So we just, again, encourage folks that have questions related to the project, their readiness. We want districts to continue to move forward on readiness evaluations. The employer portal is available. The employer readiness team is, again, available to answer any questions and provide any type of assistance. Again, the more we can do now, the better prepared and more ready we'll be for that go live. So with that, I just wanted to acknowledge that, that may be a missing element when folks go back and look at prior agendas and why it's not here today. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, so I did notice that we do have some folks who are on as phone participants. So if you have questions, our email address, the advisory committee at CalSTRS.com, is going to be the best way for you to get your questions in. We do have folks manning that box right now. Otherwise, the Q&A is available to you. And then if you have something you want to ask out loud, please go ahead and raise your hand.
And while we're waiting, I just wanted to also make folks aware our two EAC conversations scheduled through the end of this calendar year, August 4th and November 10th. will be virtual. Obviously, the governor's made an announcement the state's going to be opening up on June 15th. But again, for planning and budgetary purposes, again, some folks may have some legitimate, very real concern about traveling. We are taking that off the table. We really will continue to do EAC in a virtual platform and environment. Hopefully, again, we miss seeing everybody in person, but at the same time, hopefully doing it virtually allows for increased comfort, increased participation, and hopefully the Q&A doesn't impact our ability to dialogue and provide answers to questions that you have.
All right. I don't see any raised hands, and I don't see anybody in the Q&A. So I'm going to give you all just another minute or two before we shut it down. I don't want to shut anyone out from asking the question. But I do see that folks are starting to sign off. So I think we might be good. Thank you all for attending and for your great questions for our presenters today. And we will be following up with those of you that we've said we would follow up with. And if we find that there's a need to put out a potential FAQ from what came out of this particular meeting, we will do that as well. As always, please feel free to reach out to employer help and all of the various ways that we have for you to reach assistance with us. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, week, and summer. We will see everybody on August 4th.